Just 1 year after the disaster that was Colors Ultimate, Sonic Origins dropped. It was a collection of the first 4 Sonic games, Sonic 1, 2, CD, and 3, remastered on the Retro Engine to run in widescreen and 60 frames per second. Sonic 1, 2, and CD already got this treatment in the early 2010s, but this was the first time Sonic 3 was getting the treatment, so many people were intrigued by this release. How do they mess it up this time? To start off, what does Sonic Origins get right? Well, for one, these are console ports of the freshened up, modernized versions of the classic Sonic trilogy, including multiple new inclusions, quality of life improvements, and for some, new characters. The original versions were stuck on mobile, and fans have been begging for them to be ported to console, so finally having them here is nice. Origins isn't just a straight port, however, as it also comes with new modes such as the mission mode, where you're given short, bite-sized quests that add replayability to each game. Then there's the story mode, which has you playing each of the games in a row with animated cutscenes playing between each game. The museum that has multiple concept pieces, videos, and music from nearly all the classic Sonic games. Boss rushes for each of the games, and the drop dash from Sonic Mania implemented into each game. This all sounds great, and it is, but there are tons of problems that scale down the positives. The problems in Sonic Origins aren't massive to many people, but depending on how much you know about these games, they can kinda sting. For one, the drop dash in Sonic 1, 2, and CD are hastily slapped in, just activating a weak spin dash once you hit the ground. It's especially bad in Sonic 1 and 2, where roll lock, a code that keeps Sonic from moving in another direction while jumping, is still active when drop dashing, making it really awkward to move around. The visuals for each game are bizarre as well. The games are far blurrier than the mobile counterparts. This is especially noticeable if you're playing on a sharp display or on the Switch's handheld mode. The best assumption for why this could be is that Sonic Mania, a game that runs on the same engines as these games in Sonic Origins, had a clean filter as its default that was also blurrier, but if I remember correctly, it wasn't to this scale, and last I checked, the word Origins doesn't translate to Mania. The music for each game is also messed up. In the mobile version, each song was rigorously remastered to give off a sense of quality that couldn't be replaced with the Sega Genesis. So what did they do with Sonic Origins? Take those original Sega Genesis songs and record them off of an iPhone, of course. This especially applies to Sonic 3, where the music is straight up muffled. And if you think that's the only problem with Sonic 3, you probably don't know the cube root of 27. Sonic 3 and Knuckles being remastered was the most anticipated part of this release, and despite that, it was the part that had the most issues. The game is straight up not polished. There are many times where Sonic's hitbox was bigger than it was supposed to, and you can easily die in a way that doesn't feel like your fault. Certain objects weren't placed correctly, resulting in damage, or even straight up having incorrect flags, having Sonic fly somewhere that he's not supposed to, and let's just get this out of the way. If you aren't aware, the original version of Sonic 3 had a handful of songs that were produced by Michael Jackson and his associate, Brad Buxer. One of the tracks even went on to inspire one of Jackson's songs from the late 90s, Stranger in Moscow. While Buxer was credited in the final game, Jackson wasn't. The reasoning behind this is unclear, but it's likely it had to do with the fact that Michael Jackson in the 90s was Michael Jackson in the 90s. Sorry mom, that was just how it was. This is speculated as one of the main reasons as to why Sonic 3 was barely re-released until now. With MJ being dead and his estate hitting the gritty by his grave, Sega most likely didn't want to pay the royalties needed to get his songs back in the game. So instead, they said they planned to use the prototype tracks that were used before Jackson and Buxer's involvement. These tracks were already well known and liked by the Sonic community, so what's the problem with them being here? Well, these aren't the prototype songs that were well liked by the community. These are 16-bit versions of the Sonic and Knuckles collection tracks from 1987 that replaced the Jackson songs. While these were inspired by the prototype tracks, they took creative liberties with them. These versions of the songs are widely considered to be inferior to the actual prototype songs. Some evidence suggests that these remix versions of the songs weren't made for Sonic Origins, but rather made from an earlier prototype of Sonic 3 that wasn't used instead of the more loved versions. And I do have a justifiable reason to believe this. Observe. This was approved. The new Supersonic theme, which is notably higher quality than any other song in the game, uses the instruments found in Sonic the Hedgehog 4, which is meant to replicate the sounds of a Sega Genesis. It fails miserably. But I believe that the fact this song uses Sonic 4 instruments when every other replaced song uses actual Sega Genesis sounds and are also muffled like the Unchanged songs, and that these were all made by the same musical artist, Jun Sonoe, proves that the song tracks were likely used from another prototype. Why on earth would Jun Sonoe create songs that sound like Genesis songs and then Sonic 4 sounding music and use them in the same game? Well, I mean, this is a Sonic game. Sonic Origins as a whole isn't highly regarded by Sonic fans. Me though? I think it's fine. It still uses the definitive versions of the classic games, just with a few caveats. If you gave me the option to play the original versions of the games and the Origins versions, I'd pick the Origins versions in a heartbeat. They're widescreen, have more features, have quality of life updates, and are overall a better experience. I'd say that this collection is overhated and doesn't deserve the bashing that it gets. Although you can't get a time over in Sonic 3.